Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Andrea Piero, Director of the Visiting Artist Program at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Each year, SAIC's Visiting Artist Program hosts a variety of presentations by internationally recognized artists, designers, and scholars. Throughout its history, the program has served as a critical resource and inspiration for our community. Tonight, it is our honor to add to our rich history of distinguished guests by welcoming Wael Shawky. This program is presented in collaboration with SAIC's Department of Film, Video, New Media, and Animation's Conversations at the Edge series, and I would like to thank my colleague Amy Bestie for her partnership on this program. Tomorrow evening, a screening of Wael Shawky's trilogy, The Cabaret Crusades, will take place at the Gene Siskel Film Center beginning at 6 p.m. Wael will be in attendance to introduce the films and partake in a discussion with the audience. And you can purchase tickets online by visiting siskelfilmcenter.org or in person at the box office. Later this evening, after Wael's talk, we'll take some questions from the audience. Our staff will circulate microphones for your use. Please raise your hand so we can get a microphone to you. We are very fortunate to have another special guest with us this evening who will introduce Wael Shawky. Carolyn Christoph-Akargiev is a renowned curator, author, and researcher of artistic practices, the histories of art, and the politics of aesthetics. She is director of the Castello di Rivoli Museum of Contemporary Art and Galleria Civica di Arte Moderna e Contemporanea in Turin, Italy, and is the Edith Krieger Wolf Distinguished Professor in Art Theory and Practice at Northwestern University. Throughout her distinguished career, Carolyn has produced numerous exhibitions, publications, and events. She drafted the 14th edition of the Istanbul Biennial in 2015 and was the artistic director of Documenta 13 in 2012 that took place in Kassel, Germany, Kabul, Afghanistan, Alexandria and Cairo, Egypt, and Banff, Canada. She was also the artistic director of the 16th Biennial of Sydney in 2008. Carolyn presented a lecture through SAIC's Visiting Artists Program in 2013 to speak about Documenta, and we are delighted to have her here again with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming to the podium Carolyn Christoph-Akargiev.
Thank you, Andrea. And I'd like to thank the School of the Art Institute of Chicago for organizing and hosting this event and inviting me to have the honor of introducing Wael Shawky and his work. I also would like to thank the Art Institute of Chicago, in whose auditorium we today sit. And I'd also like to thank Northwestern, because otherwise I couldn't be here to talk about Wael Shawky, of course. That said, I met Wael Shawky in 2009, or more or less then, through Andres Versemler, his longtime first gallery in Beirut, Lebanon. Shortly thereafter, in 2010, I invited him to participate in Documenta 13, just mentioned, where he premiered the second film in the series Cabaret Crusades 2 years later in early 2012. At that time, I also had the pleasure of being in the jury of the Sharing Foundation Prize, which earned him a second exhibition in Germany in late 2012 at Kunstwerke Berlin. During the time of the preparation of Documenta, Shawky was invited to exhibit the first film in the series at the Istanbul Biennial. At Documenta, the first and the second films, The Horror Picture File and The Path to Cairo, were at Neue Galerie, while a small ceramic puppet of Tancred, the Crusader, from the second film, lay inert on a shelf not far from Adolf Hitler's bath towel and books on Morandi in the brain section of Documenta. Following that experience, Shawky and I worked together on the work for the presentation of the third film at Istanbul Biennial in an old building in Istanbul, Constantinople, Constantinople, where the trilogy itself ends as well from a storyline perspective. For his sharing prize, at that time, years ago, I wrote a short laudatio, and today I come again with a short laudatio that became the start of a monographic book just published in 2016 for his largest retrospective to date, which just recently closed, indeed, at the Castello di Rivoli. Thank you for mentioning. And I would like to give a copy of the book at the end of this laudatio to Wael Shawky and one to the Art Institute. And I just understood now that there's 2 libraries, so I don't know quite how to deal with that right now, but I'm sure you will. And now I read from that a few words. The oeuvre of Wael Shawky, born in 1971 in Alexandria, concerns the relationship between intentionality, volition, free will, and agency in the world versus the condition of being determined by prior causes or even from some form of divine intervention. Do we as individuals have singular agency? Are we conscious of what we do? Are we the authors of our actions? Can we make choices, and do our choices actually affect the world? Or are humans mere puppets and automata, subjected to external causes, conditions, or fate, forces we neither see nor understand? Shawky is best known for his trilogy, the Cabaret Crusades, which represents the Crusades from an Arab perspective as a story of greed, violence, transversal alliances, betrayal, and repeated acts of cruelty. Shot in high-definition video, the 3 films were premiered in 2010, 12, and 15, an increase in length from the first at 32 minutes to the second at roughly twice the length to the third, a full 2-hour feature-length film. Through the play of marionettes, elaborate scenography, classical Arabic speech, electronic music, and traditional Sufi chanting, they depict great pain, suffering, and acts of violence, including stabbing, beheading, cannibalism, and scenes of dogs eating a dead body. There is a sharp contrast between this violence and the magical realism and beauty of the scenography, of the marionettes, and of their clothing, the crisp photography, and the seductive music. By looking backwards towards the past, like the angel in Walter Benjamin's description of Paul Klee's figure irresistibly propelled into the future, quote, to which his back is turned, while the pile of debris before him grows skyward, this storm is what we call progress, unquote. Shawky's works delve into the roots of today's troubles in the Middle East and the world at large. We watch unspeakable horrors through fantasy, and even with some indifference to suffering, which is made tolerable thanks to the ploy of historical distance, as well as through fairy tale fiction, puppetry, and cabaret humor. In the midst of war, then as today, we continue to till our gardens and hope that art may still have some agency, at least to raise consciousness and critical thinking, and through the power of imagination to propel us towards a milder destiny. And I won't read the whole thing because I have only 8 minutes, so I skip to the end of the essay. The last chapter of the essay is called, "These are things of this earth which will persist on this earth." One of Shawky's favorite novels is José Saramago's 1991 The Gospel According to Christ. Perhaps he feels his own art is akin to Saramago's, insofar as they both present subversive perspectives on historic events, opening history up to scrutiny in allegories of crystalline precision and craft. In the novel, Saramago portrays the life of Jesus from a man's perspective, directly humanized to the degree that his story becomes that of the fragility of civilization as a whole. God tells Jesus of the future, quote, Future generations will refer to this area as the holy places, because you were born, lived, and died here. So it didn't seem fitting that the cradle of the religion you represent should fall into the hands of infidels. This justified the coming of great armies from the West, who for almost 200 years fought to conquer and preserve for Christendom the cave where you were born and the hill where you will die. To mention only the most important landmarks. Are these armies the Crusades? That's right. And did they conquer what they wanted? No, but they slaughtered many people. What about the Crusaders themselves? They lost just as many lives, if not more. And all this bloodshed in our name, they will go into battle crying, God wills it, and no doubt die crying, God willed it. Such a nice way to end one's life. The sacrifice isn't worth it. To save one's soul, my son, the body must be sacrificed. And then we are told a little later, quote, Jesus realized then that he had been tricked, as the lamb led to sacrifice is tricked, and that his life had been planned for death from the very beginning. Remembering the river of blood and suffering that would flow from his side and flood the globe, he called out to the open sky, where God could be seen smiling, Men, forgive him, for he knows not what he has done. Then he began expiring in the midst of a dream. He found himself back in Nazareth and saw his father shrugging his shoulders and smiling as he told him, just as I cannot ask you all the questions, neither can you give me all the answers, unquote. In this dark parable, the scene of crucifixion ends with these words, quote, these are things of this earth, which will persist on this earth, and from them will be written the only possible history. It is a pleasure to conclude with these words this brief presentation, and I wish Wael all the best on his next journeys through the black oil of the Arab Peninsula and the Emirates, which lie at the heart of his upcoming research for his new works to come. That's it. So, now this is the book for Wael.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Caroline. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, so I decided just to concentrate on one project, which is Cabaret Crusades. And I decided just to show a few clips from the three parts. And in between, I would just give brief description, and maybe we can open the discussion after that. So I started this project in 2000. Basically, it was actually, the beginning was 2009, but I started 2010 when I was invited from Michelangelo Pistoletto to his foundation in Biella, Italy. And I had this idea to start to make a research about the history of the Crusades. I really didn't know enough to make this project, but I was really hoping to make this research. I always consider myself only a translator for these big ideas. I don't really consider myself even making an archive from the history of the Crusades. But anyway, the beginning was from reading a book by Amin Maalouf, The Crusades Through Arab Eyes. I liked the book a lot. It's really, for me, I decided to make it more like the guide for me, that it's more like the choreography of the whole film. But I decided to write the script based on the original sources that Amin Maalouf used, which are mainly Usama, a historian called Usama ibn Munqidh, and someone called Ibn al-Athir, and someone called Ibn al-Qalansi. These are the main writers. Of course, there are many different sources, but these were the main writers. that the entire series based on them. They lived, some of them lived during the Crusades time, some of them lived after the Crusades time. Then it came, the most important also is when I started to read about the speech by Pope Urban II in 1095, that was in South France, in Clermont. And I was really fascinated by the speech, and I was especially fascinated by the fact that this speech was not documented during the speech itself, and it was documented after the speech. So that's when we tried to search for this speech, we found maybe 4 different versions of the same thing. And for me, this is even more about my idea about the written history and how it's really not a fact, but it's a human creation, that I like it a lot as a format, and I'd like a lot to transform this form into a new visual experience. But also was important for me to know that we don't know exactly what Pope Urban II said in his speech in 1095, but we know that there is a result for this. There is the Crusades. He managed to convince people to walk, I mean, at least from what I read, that the beginning was happening from the Rhine land, from places like Cologne, even if it was not existing as Cologne now. But people walked from this area, from what's called Germany today, to reach Jerusalem. And half of them died in this trip because they didn't have money or horses or anything. So we know the result. We know that the Crusades that lasted almost 200 years happened, but the beginning was this speech by Pope Urban II. So there is a sort of manipulation in my point of view that led into the concept of using marionette to try to tell this whole story. So even using marionette in this whole film, it was not really to show a good part or bad part. In fact, I will show now parts of the first film, and then I will describe more about this. But I just want to say that some of these marionettes, I used them twice, sometimes to present a crusader, sometimes the same marionette is presenting a Muslim leader. And yeah, of course, because also part of this whole process is not to show bad or good, but just to make this type of translation for this written history, but from the Arab point of view. So if it's possible, we can just see the first part, please.
يا شعب الفرنجة، يا شعب الله المحبوب المختار، لقد جاءت من تخوم فلسطين ومن مدينة القسطنطينية أنباء محزنة تعلن أن جنسا لعينا أبعد ما يكون عن الله قد طغى وبغى في تلك البلاد، بلاد المسيحيين في الشرق. قلب موائد القرابين المقدسة ونهب الكنائس وخربها وأحرقها، وساقوا بعض الأسرى إلى بلادهم، وقتلوا بعضهم الآخر بعد أن عذبوهم أشنع تعذيب، ودنسوا الأماكن المقدسة برجسهم، وقطعوا أوصال الإمبراطورية البيزنطية، وانتزعوا منها أقاليما بلغ من سعتها أن المسافر فيها لا يستطيع اجتيازها في شهرين كاملين. على من إذن تقع تبعة الانتقام لهذه المظالم واستعادة تلك الأصقاع إذا لم تقع عليكم أنتم يا من حباكم الله أكثر من أي قوم آخرين بالمجد في القتال، وبالبسالة العظيمة، وبالقدرة على إذلال رؤوس من يقفون في وجوهكم. ألا فليكن من أعمال أسلافكم ما يقوي قلوبكم، أمجاد شارلمان وعظمته، وأمجاد غيره من ملوككم وعظمتهم. فليثر همتكم ضريح المسيح المقدس ربنا ومنقذنا، الضريح الذي تمتلكه الآن نجسة وغيره من الأماكن المقدسة التي لوثت ودنست. لا تدعوا شيئا يقعد بكم من أملاككم أو من شؤون أسركم، ذلك بأن هذه الأرض التي تسكنونها الآن والتي تحيط بها من جميع جوانبها البحار، وتلك الجبال ضيقة لا تتسع لسكانها الكثيرين، تكاد تعجز عن أن تجود بما يكفيكم من الطعام، ومن أجل هذا يذبح بعضكم بعضا، وتتحاربون ويهلك كثر منكم في الحروب الداخلية. طهروا قلوبكم إذن من أدران الحقد، واقضوا على ما بينكم من نزاع، واتخذوا طريقكم إلى الضريح المقدس، وانتزعوا هذه الأرض من ذلك الجنس الخبيث وتملكوها أنتم. إن أورشليم أرض لا نظير لها في ثمارها، هي فردوس المباهج. إن المدينة العظمى القائمة في وسط العالم تستغيث بكم أن هبوا لإنقاذها، فقوموا بهذه الرحلة راغبين متحمسين، تتخلصوا من ذنوبكم، وثقوا بأنكم ستنالون من أجل ذلك مجدا لا يفنى في ملكوت السماوات.
Okay, so this is part of the first film of the series, and it's called Cabaret Crusades, the horror show file. So the first film focus on only the first 4 years of the Crusades history, from 1095 until 1099, until the Crusaders managed to enter Jerusalem. The trip started, of course, from when Alexius Comnene I was seeking help from Rome, so he asked Pope Urban II for help, because the Seljuk Turks during this time were big threat on the Byzantine Empire. So what I'm trying to do here is just to focus on in the beginning, what we've seen in the beginning, that was the plague that hit Constantinople in 541, 542. According to what also we know, that the amount of people that were affected and the deaths were almost between 25 million to 50 millions, which is really big amount of people, of course, during this time. And anyway, that was really bad, affected the economy of the Byzantine Empire for many, many years. And I tried to connect between this in the beginning and the starting and the rising of this idea about the Crusades that happened in 1095. During I didn't really also know how should I start, how should I make the marionettes in the beginning, but it was, the idea came again in Italy, in Biella, because I felt that it's, of course, it's from the Arab point of view, as I said, but it's still, it's this first 4 years, they are speaking more about the European history that we really don't know enough about. So for me, the first part of the Crusades, the horror show file, is more, even the scenography is more Renaissance. And the marionettes actually that I'm using here is not something that I made. They are historical marionettes, European marionettes, that they go back, they're like almost 200 years old marionettes. So it was more like, it was more like just the trying to begin this whole series from visually, I find it more European. That we'll not see after that in the second part. Just to say very quickly that this trip that led into Jerusalem, of course, they had to go through, first of all, they had to go through Constantinople. Then after that, they went to Edessa, Ma'arat al-Nu'man, Antioch, until they reached Jerusalem. There are many details. I mean, for me, it's really, as I said again, it's for me, I don't find that it's just about the details that it has been written. Of course, it's very important. I'm really into details, but it's for me, again, it's more like sort of analysis to the way we believe in this written history. So I would like to go to the second film that happened after very quickly. That the second film that we will be seeing parts from it now is dealing with the Crusaders when they are already settled in Jerusalem. And when they arrived to Jerusalem, they had 4 different provinces or settlements. One is Jerusalem, of course, and one is Edessa, Antioch, and Tripoli. So in the second film, that for me is more complicated because I decided to make the marionettes myself, or at least to design them myself. It deals more with the relationship between the different Muslim Arab leaders when the Crusaders are already settled in the area. So it's not only about the relationship between the Crusaders and the Arab Muslim countries, but also between the Arab Muslim countries and with each other. So if it's, please, we can see this.
ينبغي أن تسير التحضيرات في سرية تامة على أن يتم التنفيذ في العلن، وليكن المكان هو المسجد، واليوم هو الجمعة ظهراً.
غنيني لحنين مع البلبلي فالرماح البريد في صبه يحكي خرير الماء في الجدول يا أين النديم السمحو أين الصبوح فقد هم الضاع الهم قلبي الجريح ثلاثة هن أحب المنى كأس وانقام ووجه صبي
Okay, so what we've just seen now is Hassan Sabbah, that is the founder of the Hashashin group. And I tried to mention this group in the second film, also that was the beginning to show not really the split that is happening between Sunnah and Shia, but the effect for this split during the Crusades time also. So Hassan Sabbah, also supposed to be, is Ismaili Nadari, one of the Shia sects, even if is also rejected from some of the Shia sects, but he's supposed to be, his main goal during this time also is to assassinate many of the Sunnah leaders. And for example, one of the important Sunnah leaders is Ahmad ad-Din Zenki, that was assassinated by or through Al-Hashashin group. So I just want to speak very quickly about the process of making these marionettes. I was invited to make the second film in Oban, in South France, which is, like, for me, it was very important because location-wise, it's very, very close to Clermont, France, where the place that had the first crusade, the launching of the first crusade. So again, it was the decision of how can I get the best way to make the marionette for the second film. I found that I would like to work with the history of this area, and the history of this area is to make ceramic santons, which is very small figurines made out of ceramic, and you can find them in many different churches in France and in Europe in general. I didn't know about this actually when I went there, but I thought it can be amazing if I can work with the craftsmen in this area and try to make out of the same very old historical traditional Christian actually technique, is to try to make with them ceramic marionettes that tells the history of the Crusades, but from the Arab point of view. Just try to shift the roles, and I think we managed to do it, and that was for me. Again, it was the way designing these marionettes are more personal. They're closer to my drawings. Thank you, Caroline. You showed some of the drawings in the beginning, but it's part of this. So the film is starting from 1099, as I said, when the Crusaders are already settled in Jerusalem, and it goes until 1146. And in 1146 is the assassination of Ahmad ad-Din Zenki, this important Muslim leader, that one of his missions, of course, was to try to get back Jerusalem from the Crusaders. But he was assassinated before that, and we see that his son, Nur ad-Din Zenki, is taking the lead of the Muslim countries. And that's the end of the end of the second film. That we will see after that the importance of Nur ad-Din Zenki in the third film. So can we see another part, because I would like also to speak about some of the figures. I'm sorry I have to skip many things, but I am just trying to talk about the historians inside the film itself. So this is Osama ibn Munqidh that we will see now. He is the the foreign minister of Damascus, but at the same time, he is the historian that I was mentioning that I took
جميلة هي
many
دمشق.
of his texts in this.
هذا الأتابك الوغد يحلم بضمها إلى باقي مدن الشام. لن أسمح بهذا ما حييت. يجب أن تذهب مرة أخرى إلى القدس لتأكيد التعاون الفرنجي الدمشقي. هذه المرة سوف تحمل لهم مقترحات محددة للغاية.
يرغم الجيش الفرنجي زنكي على الابتعاد عن دمشق. يتحد الجيش الدمشقي مع جيش القدس في حال نشوب خطر جديد. يدفع معين الدين أونر 20,000 دينار ذهباً لتغطية نفقات العمليات العسكرية. يتولى أونر قيادة حملة لاحتلال قلعة بانياس وأخذها من زنكي وتسليمها إلى ملك القدس. حضرت بطبرية في عيد من أعيادهم، وقد خرج الفرسان يلعبون بالرماح، وقد خرج معهما عجوزان فانيتان أوقفوهما في رأس الميدان، وتركوا في رأسه الآخر خنزيرا، صمتوه وطرحوه على صخرة، وسابقوا بين العجوزين، ومع كل واحدة منهما سرية من الخيالة يشدون منها، والعجوزان تقومان وتقعان في كل خطوة، وهم يضحكون حتى سبقت واحدة منهما فأخذت ذلك الخنزير في سبقها.
So this is, as I said, this is the foreign ambassador of Damascus. So as we see here, the ruler of Damascus is Mu'in ad-Din Onur. He's sending his ambassador to Jerusalem to make the first peace agreement between Damascus and Jerusalem to protect Damascus from Ahmad ad-Din Zenki, basically, from another Arab leader. And what's more important to me, actually, that, as I said, I was using his text, Osama ibn Munqidh text, because he is a historian. When he went to Jerusalem, he also was writing his memory, how he was seeing the for him, the Crusaders from his point of view, again from the Arab point of view, let's say. I think it's also important to go for the third film now. So I would like to talk about it very quickly, also to continue what Karen was just saying about José Saramago. So I think was very important for me a conversation that I remember was happening in this book. It was supposed to be that Saramago is imagining Jesus Christ speaking to God and asking God why we are very weak, breakable, and why we're not made out of light. So how come this body that it's holding, this brain and the soul that can be all finished in just one accident or something? So it was for me more about this idea of the fragility that led into, of course, this idea of working with glass. But I didn't know how, again, to make the glass marionette. In the beginning, I knew that I need this last film to be made out of glass marionette, but I didn't know how it should look like or where. So it came the decision to make it in Murano, from Murano glass, because of the events that are happening in the last film. The last film is called Cabaret Crusades, The Secrets of Karbala. It's for me the most complex film because it deals with many different layers. It's not only the history of the Crusades, but also the history of Sunna-Shia conflict. So in the beginning, it starts with this battle that happened almost 50 years after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. In this battle, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad was killed with another 18 members of his family. So at least I'm taking the version of the story that both party agrees on, which is the killing of the grandson, his name is Al-Hussein. So from this moment, from Karbala, this split happened in the Muslim world. Of course, there is Sunnah and Shia. And so the beginning of the film is going back to Karbala, and the end of the film is the Fourth Crusades. So maybe I can just start with this part. But anyway, I just want to go back to the marionette. The decision was to make them in Murano glass because the involvement of the Venetians in the Fourth Crusades that I'm ending the whole series with. Again, I didn't know exactly how they should look like. After many tries, I found that making a glass figure can be very kitschy, let's say, and it can be very easy to be kitsch. And it was many tries until I was visiting the Metropolitan Museum, the African section in the Metropolitan Museum, and I decided to make all the marionettes based on these African masks. Of course, after turning these African masks into Murano glass, they become something completely different anyway, but that was the process of making them. So it's not completely the African mask, but it's based on it. I think we can just start to see part of the first part of Cabaret, of the Secrets of Karbala, and then we speak about it.
أستحلفك بالله أن تبلغ حسينا. قل له ارجع بأهل بيتك ولا يغرنك أهل الكوفة فقد كذبوك وكذبوني وليس لكذوب رأي.
والله لأفعلن. يا بكر، اصعد به فوق القصر واضرب عنقه، ثم أتبعه بجسده.
تقول له أم سلمة: لا تخرج إلى العراق، فقد سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: يقتل ابن الحسين بأرض العراق، وعندي تربة دفعها إلي في قارورة.
يقول لها: إني والله مقتول، وإن لم أخرج إلى العراق يقتلونني أيضا. وأخذ تربة فأعطاها من تلك التربة أيضا في قارورة أخرى، وقال عليه السلام: إذا فاضت دما فاعلمي أني قتلت. وفي يوم عاشوراء تنظر إلى القارورتين بعد الظهر، فإذا هما قد فاضتا دما.
يقتل مسلم يوم عرفة، ويخرج الحسين بعده بيوم واحد متجها إلى العراق دون أن يعلم بما حدث.
يا حسين، ألا ترون إلى الماء كأنه كبد السماء؟ والله لا تذوقون منه قطرة حتى تموتوا عطشا. لقد أتى شمر بن ذي الجوشن بأخبار الكوفة.
ينزل الحسين وأصحابه على حكم عبيد الله، وإن أبوا فازحف إليهم حتى تقتلهم وتمثل بهم، فإنهم مستحقون.
Okay, so yeah, that's only the beginning of the film. Of course, there is a big. It's really not connected in the timeline with the Crusades history, but it was very important to start with this, as I said, and also to end the whole series with the Fourth Crusades. I will just give very brief idea about the Fourth Crusades. So what happened that in the Fourth Crusades, mainly the French leaders decided to find another way to reach Jerusalem. To reach Jerusalem, it was, before that, as I said, it has to go through Constantinople, and then they have to go also again through Edessa and Antioch. So the other way was to go through the Mediterranean Sea. And the shortest way, of course, is to go through Venice. So if they go from Venice to Alexandria, they can reach after this Cairo. And if they capture Cairo, it will be very easy after this to go to Jerusalem. So that was the main plan. And they made an agreement with Doge Dandolo, the Doge of Venice, during this time, that they pay him, I think, according to what I read, 85,000 golden mark or golden something. And at the same time, the Doge Dandolo is responsible to have more than 200 ships, and to also to be responsible for the food of all the soldiers that are coming from all over Europe. Anyway, what happened that the Venetians managed to make all the ships as the agreement was happening, but the French leaders did not manage to collect all this 85,000 golden mark. So they had to find another agreement. The following year, all the soldiers arrived, but they didn't have enough money to pay for the Venetians. So the Venetians decided another plan. And instead of going to Alexandria, they decided to go first to Zara, because Zara has some money, so we can go to Zara and take the money from Zara and then continue to Alexandria. The soldiers did not agree on this, according to many of the things that I read, because this is a Christian city. So how come they will fight with the name of Jesus Christ, another Christian city? But anyway, in the end, they agreed. And they went to Zara, and they split Zara into two parts, the Venetians and the French. And they spent there until the winter end, but they found again that they don't have enough money. So they did not continue to Alexandria as planned. In fact, they found that they have to go to another Christian city that has money as well, which was in this time Constantinople. And they found that there is a way to go to Constantinople, and at least this is what is written about Doge Dandolo, that he said to them, because the soldiers again refused to go to Constantinople, but what's been said that these people are not good Christians, they are Orthodox. So it's okay to go there and to kill them with the name of Jesus Christ. So this is what in the end happened, and that was the Fourth Crusades. And for me, that was the end of the whole series, just to at least to show that it's clearly becoming, even if it was a dream by Pope Urban II that is a religious war, it's becoming clearly economical war. Okay, so that's the end of the film, but I would like to show something, just part of the film in between. And this part is the agreement that is happening before the final and maybe the most important battle for Muslims, which is Battle of Hattin. Battle of Hattin happened in 1187. And from this battle, actually, Salah ad-Din managed to get Jerusalem back to the Muslim side. So I'm just showing part of this.
إن الفرصة المتاحة لنا لن تتكرر، والرأي عندي أن على جيش المسلمين أن يواجه جميع الكفرة في معركة حسنة التخطيط، وعلينا الاندفاع بعزم وتصميم في الجهاد قبل أن يتشتت شمل عساكرنا، فلنتوجه فورا إلى طبرية.
يجب أن نقاتل المسلمين ونمنعهم عن طبرية.
إن طبرية لي، وقد رضيت أن يأخذ القلعة وزوجتي ومالنا بها ويعود، فما رأيت مثل هذا العسكر الذي مع صلاح الدين كثرة وقوة، وإذا أخذ طبرية لا يمكنه المقام بها، فمتى فارقها وعاد عنها أخذناها.
قد أطلت في التخويف من المسلمين، ولا شك أنك تريدهم وتميل إليهم، وإلا ما كنت تقول هذا. وأما قولك إنهم كثيرون، فإن النار لا يضرها كثرة الحطب.
أنا واحد منكم، إن تقدمتم تقدمت، وإن تأخرتم تأخرت، وسترون ما يكون.
Okay, so we can go to the last part I would like to show here. And I would like to show it not only because it's the final of the film, but it's also because it's one of the very few European sources that I used in making the script, which is the Song of Roland. And I found the Song of Roland very important. I used it almost 3 times in the whole series. It's for me, it's of course, it speaks about the King Charlemagne and how he managed to get revenge for Roland. But also for me, it's more important that it's the first documented European song that maybe its originally was folk songs that was collected during the Crusades history. So most of the opinions saying that this song was already existing from 780 almost, and it was more important in the beginning of the Crusades history. Yeah, we can just see the last part, please.
أبانا الحقيقي في هذا اليوم سأدافع عن قضياتي أنت الذي مددت عونك إلى يونس في جوف الحوت وأخرجته سالما من هناك وبعدما وفرت ملك نينا وانقذت عبدك دانيال من بين أنياب الأسد الشجاع المفترس ووقيت الأطفال الثلاثة وسط النار مولاي اجعل هذا اليوم هيبتي وعوني وإذا كان
أنت الذي مددت عونك إلى يونس في جوف الحوت وأخرجته سالما من هناك وبعدما وفرت ملك نينوى أنقذت عبدك دانيال من بين أنياب الأسد الشجاع المفترس ووقيت الأطفال الثلاثة وسط النار
Okay, so yeah, so what we see in the last scene actually is the Fourth Crusades. This is the scene in Constantinople, and I think it's the time now. So maybe the best is just to open the conversation for you. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot.
Hello, thank you. Thank you for such a prodigious work. I saw it at Documenta 13, and I'm really happy to see this, just some clips of the last film. Now I'm going to ask a really ignorant question. It's in Arabic, and you used Arabic sources, historical sources. But there are other elements. You used, the ceramic arts of southern France and glass of Murano, the masks of Africa. And when I saw it, at length, because I spent several hours watching it in Kassel, it does seem like you definitely aren't taking sides. It's not like, it's like they're all scoundrels for the most part. And I just wonder, when you keep saying it's from an Arab point of view, I don't really understand what you mean, that it's from an Arab point of view.
Okay. This is the title by Amin Maalouf, first of all. So it's the Crusades through Arab eyes. But also when I say the Arab point of view, I mean Usama ibn Munqidh. I mean the historians that I made the script from.
Okay.
That this is mainly the historians, because it's, of course, it has many different sources, but all the dialogue that is happening is really not something that I invented. I decided to make it exactly as it's written, even if I don't believe it sometimes, but I just have to take it as is. Sometimes even for the Song of Roland, I used the translated Arabic version that I think it has some mistakes in the translation, but I use it as is. I used the Arabic translation as is. And I think that was the reason when I was saying it's more like, the Arabic point of view.
So you mean strictly the source, the historical sources?
Yes.
Okay.
But also, I mean, to be honest, sometimes I even doubt about the title of Amin Maalouf, The Crusades Through Arab Eyes, because I'm not sure if these people even were Arab. They were Muslims.
Well, that's partly my question. Like, who is the Arab?
Exactly.
You know, what is the Arab point of view?
Yeah,
right?
But that's how it was written. But I think, as I said, it's more for me. That's why I think it's more for me like analysis for how we believe in history, in written history. So, yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's in the visual part, it was also a lot of research to try to make, for example, the second part of Cabaret Crusades, the path to Cairo. I was thinking of how can I make the visual is, again, more Arab point of view, not Renaissance like the first one. In the end, I found a historian and artist who lived in the 15th century. He was born in the 15th century, actually. His name is Nasuh Matriksi. He's Bosnian, amazing artist, actually. So all the backgrounds of each city you see, Damascus, Aleppo, Edessa, it's based on his maps that he was making for this time. Of course, I made it different. I had to make it more like 3D. But it was based on him. Although this is happening almost 250 years after our time, but that was the first visual that I can rely on. That's the thing.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for such a beautiful presentation. I wanted to ask you, you said in your third film it was very important for you to start with the story of Hussein and the Battle of Karbala, and you went into the details of Kufa and the murder of Muslim bin Aqil, and you end with the Fourth Crusade. And I was wondering if you could talk more about that connection, especially since Ashura is so important in Shia philosophy, and the Crusades and the Fourth Crusade fall really off outside of the Muslim world, and how we're seeing them together.
Yes. No, I think it was important to link between the Sunna Shia split and the Catholic Orthodox also, because what happened in the Fourth Crusades, at least from what we've seen, it was maybe another metaphor for the Catholic Church attacking the Orthodox Church. It was Europe attacking the Byzantine Empire, which is Orthodox Church, basically. So I was just trying to connect between these two parts. Yes, please.
Do you mind if I add something to what you answered to the question about the Arab perspective?
Please do.
Yeah. I think that the main difference or the main shift in perspective is the one of not using a teleological perspective. So history is not going towards something and doesn't come from something. There's not a kind of causality and teleological perspective which was characteristic of Western history, also art history, until very, very recently. And the chronicle, the tactic of chronology or chronicles, which is also a fluxus, anti-teleological version of things, to go back to art, is a way of weaving together patterns that are constantly repeating. So it's not that you don't take sides. The Arab perspective or the Islamic perspective is a perspective that is many layers stuck together on the surface, which is why I showed the wooden reliefs. So I think structurally there's something to add to the answer.
Thank you. Thanks.
I was just wondering from like a person who hasn't studied the Crusades at all or doesn't really know anything about it, if like books or references to how I could learn more about what the conflict that you're talking about.
Oh, books in Arabic, you mean?
Or books are like in English, if it's possible. If there's not,
I'm sure there are many people can tell you much more than about this. I was really, really concentrating more on the Arabic sources. I mean, honestly, I mean, and it's, I mean, maybe even sometimes I think that this, this project was possible because the Arabic sources were not many. They're not really too many. I mean, I think now I have this project, as Caroline was mentioning, about the history of the Arab Gulf, and for me, I'm struggling much more because there are many different sources, contemporary sources, so it becomes really much more difficult. But as I said, most of these sources that I really used were based on, of course, there are things like the European part, like William the Tyre, for example. But the main thing, as I said, is Usama ibn Munqidh, Ibn al-Qalansi, Ibn al-Athir, Ibn Jubair. They're all Ibn. Ibn means the son of. So, yeah, that's... yes.
Hi, sorry, from up in the balcony. So I had a question about... Hi. So I had a question about your combination of, say, dialogue or prose and song or poetry and this kind of combination, because I mean, coming from the Western kind of medieval perspective, this is a moment where the changeover is happening in these centuries between a kind of idea of poetry as the way you preserve a history to prose as a way you preserve a history. And I was wondering if this is also a kind of shift, or what was at stake for you in moving back and forth between those registers of having kind of song sections and prose sections?
I mean, I tried my best to keep it a musical film, but sometimes it doesn't work this way. That was really the main goal behind it. But also part of this is to keep the idea of the cabaret, that has this idea of the show, that it's in front of us. The history is more like a show that is happening, one showing something on the stage after the other. I mean, and this idea started to change. I'm sorry, I will have to go to part of the scenography also, because that was part of it. I was thinking of the musical element a lot. So in the second part, especially with the song, for example, with the Hassan Sabbah that we were seeing in this Hashashin group, I recorded all the music of the second part in Bahrain with the traditional pearl fishing musicians. And for me, this is very type of male nomad music that is connected to the sea. I understand that it has nothing to do with the history of the Crusades particularly, but I found it really as many elements that I connected. In fact, I find these things for me is making more shifts that does not really make the same story becomes like a cliche. So I search for this. In the third part of Cabaret Crusades, the Secrets of Karbala, I decided to make most of the music in Egypt, that is connected more with the history of Sufi music. And also, I decided to use sometimes radouds. For you who knows radoud, radoud is a sheikh in the Shia culture, actually is usually telling the story of the killing of Hussein, the grandson of the Prophet Muhammad, but he's telling this in a very musical, maybe weeping, musical way, without music, of course, but he's singing when he's telling this story. So yeah, it always had a reference to something.
Thank you so much. I have a question about your art history. I really, really appreciate it when you just said about Nasu Matraksi, and it made me think, okay, I'm not completely wrong. To me, especially in the first two parts of the trilogy, like in the cityscapes, it seems to me you're referring almost to these earlier Ottoman, even Persian ways of depicting cityscapes, like Nasu and even Bitzad or something. I'm sorry, my pronunciation is terrible. But then in the third one, I thought, okay, there's almost more of a simulation of a natural scenography. Yes. And you had moved away from these sort of cityscape, from the illuminated manuscripts or interior panels like in Bitzad illuminations. And is there a different art history in the third one that I'm missing? Or have you liberated yourself from this art history of Ottoman and Persian sort of chronicles?
The scenography of the last film, the third Cabaret Crusade, the Secrets of Karbala, is, I think I was feeling after the second part that I don't want the scenography to become always the background, like what happened in the second Crusades. I was trying to think of the scenography as an element as important as the music, as the script, as everything, because it really represents the geographical element in this whole story. So that's when it came the idea of making the stage that it's in movement. We made this stage actually in Germany. The whole filming of the last Cabaret Crusades was made at the museum K20, and they was really fantastic. People really managed to make this whole stage possible, that I was moving the stage with remote control. But yeah, the thing is, the background is based on Giotto's painting, actually. So that's when you see all this pink, and actually came again this Giotto as an icon in the images that Caroline just showed for our last exhibition, especially the pink and the gold. Of course. Sure.
Hi. I was wondering, you shared with us where the design for your...
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry,
It's all good. You shared with us where the design for the puppets in the first and the third films came from. And so I was wondering where the design for the second film came from, and also why the similarities to different animals for various characters.
The second, as I said, the second film is closer to my drawings. It's more like, usually the drawings are mixed between animal and human beings. But I think there is also, of course, there are different reasons for this. One of them that it's coming from the history of the something like Kalila Wudemna, that is telling that someone is telling you the history, an animal is telling you the history. So I think in that case, it's also helping me more not to concentrate on the good and the bad person, and it becomes really more figure. But this also leads to the idea again of using the marionette. Before using the marionette, I used to work a lot with kids. And I made many films working with kids. And I think this is very important. I said this actually many times, that I really hate acting and the skills of actor. I really don't like to depend on it. So that's why when you have a kid that is playing, for example, I made a film called Telematch Sadat. It was reenactment of the assassination of Sadat in 1981. So what is happening that the kids are just playing again this assassination, but the kids don't know actually who Sadat is, and they don't know this assassination. They're just following what I'm telling them. So it's very difficult to see on their faces any type of cliches. They don't have this memory anyway. And yeah, of course, at the same time, it's also a way to erase the gender layer from the whole story. So there is no men, women, but there is a figure, there is community. And then it came after that, I think it developed more with the idea of using marionettes, because it became even more about the topic. And you can project yourself easier on this marionette, whether it's an animal, whether it's a human being, but it's much easier for me at least to project myself on this marionette, more than a professional actor.
I think it's very interesting how you're drawing from very different sources and creating your language. And I'm curious how you place the work in relation to الليلة الكبيرة or Salah ad-Din by Yusuf Shaheen, and more maybe contemporary reiterations of historic stories in cinema or on the stage.
Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned Yusuf Shaheen and Salah ad-Din. Of course, Yusuf Shaheen is an amazing Egyptian director, but I think it was also important that Salah ad-Din is considered one of the most important, of course, if not the most, he is the most important, of course, leader for all Muslims. But his story, I mean, for example, for the movie by Yusuf Shaheen, the whole story ends when Salah ad-Din bring Jerusalem back to the Muslims. And actually, in fact, this is not the end of the story. For sure, it's not the end of the story. I decided not to end there. I think it was, and also there are mistakes for Salah ad-Din that it shows in this film, for sure. And there is sort of competition between Nur ad-Din Zinki and Salah ad-Din, and that was also shown in the film. It's even part of the historical references. It's written. But it's not the ideal for the typical story that people would like to say. Also, Salah ad-Din, of course, I mean, with all his great parts that was written, it was also clear that I had to show him that he is the one who, because with Salah ad-Din, it was the ending of the Fatimid period in Egypt. But he was sent by Nur ad-Din Zinki to do this mission. So I think all these details is not part of the cinema of Yusuf Shaheen, which is I still, of course, respect it a lot. And for Salah Jaheen, for Layla Kibira, of course, it's part of the folklore in Egypt, and we all love it a lot. Yeah, but it's I think it's part of our memory. We have one important marionette play. It's called Al-Layla Kibira, the Grand Night. So this is what she's mentioning now. This is really good also. When I was also trying to start the marionettes, I was trying to think of which type of marionettes do I use. I thought I can make research, and I find that we have history in the Arab world for the marionettes that can lead into something really unique visually. But in fact, I did not find, unfortunately. I found that in Egypt, all this history is coming from Eastern Europe, actually. So what we have in Salah Jahin play, it's coming from Russia and Ukraine.
Hi. I just want to ask, I'm curious to know if you faced any censorship issues, especially with bringing up things about Sunnah and Shia, because I know, like, specifically in the Gulf, when you're trying to present work like this, it's very problematic, especially with the symbology that's being used, like using music and the costumes and animals instead of characters. I'm just curious to know.
I showed this work in Beirut. I showed it in Doha. And, it worked. I mean, it was okay. I mean, I don't think it was a problem. I think I decided not to show Al-Hussein in this whole film. So you don't see him actually in the film at all. It was just a conversation. I really respected this, so I did not show him at all. Yeah, it was I mean, in the end, the Arab leaders, I mean, usually the problems come when it's a sacred figure, but it will not happen if it's just a leader. Let's see what will happen in the Gulf history. This is another issue, but this is...
Hi, I was so moved from the first shot of this film, and I was wondering, the beauty of the marionettes and everything, I'm wondering if you would be interested or to entertain the mind to bring a contemporary version of what's going on, using these marionettes telling the story, because it's like watching the news, but you doing this current events, and maybe not so much the Crusades, but even using those marionettes to tell the story of the last 20 years, 30 years, and to today, like we're seeing on the news.
I'm sorry, the question is...
is if you would do doing the history of the regions and leading up to the wars that are going on right now, using the marionettes.
Okay. But, okay, yes, of course. But that's why I was saying that I started the whole series in 2010. It was before this whole region, in the regional Arab events, before all the revolutions, before everything. And I think that was really important, actually. I don't think I would do it if it was after, because I mean, this is really like important. I don't know how can I be like reacting into what is happening today. I prefer much more that I deal with this all history, as I said, as human creation, and just try to transform this all written history into a new format. Yeah, and also again, of course, it's much easier to see this history when you're looking into it through puppets. It's really not just human being, but there are many scenes where you see the heads of the puppets are thrown away and cut off, and all of this. And I think it can be even sometimes it's more like it has humor in it, but you can get the point. Yeah, that's. We're out of time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Thank you.